were being done through my office with the nation that was called the Office of Human Development, where I began then to put together these kind of easily understandable ideas. The first one being Chains and Images of Psychological Slavery.
Yes.
So rather than going into a very deep kind of thing that Fanon had talked about, black skins and white masks, the rest of their very complex kind of ideas.
Challenging to penetrate if one doesn't have the understanding.
Exactly. So I translated that into very meaningful, short, almost pamphlets.
Which is an art in itself. I mean, very few people are able to do that, and that pamphlet's a very good example. I've distributed that to, must be hundreds, if not thousands of young people over the last 20 years. So it's interesting that you're saying there are more of those, because that's the only one I'm aware of.
Oh, well, it was that one. The Visions for Black Men was a follow-up of that as well. And then the Community of Self.
But you're including that as a pamphlet.
Yeah, all of those. All of those. And so all of those early books, in fact, it was a concept of trying to make the language understandable to the masses. So rather than to speak to other experts, all of these little books were intentionally written so that if you could read at the 8th grade level, you could read this and understand it.
So it's a democratization of black psychology.
Absolutely.
Which is in stark contrast to how white psychology operates, which is to exclusivize
exactly
the thinking, the knowledge, the wisdom.
Exactly. One of the things that Saeed Khatib, Cedric, said in a paper that he did that was called Black Studies, the Study of Black People, is that Black Studies is looking at Black people from a Black framework with the effort to help the consumer understand himself. The study of Black people is looking at Black people from another framework to help other people understand Black people. And so he said that the idea that we needed to adopt as the ones who were going to be the purveyors of Black studies was to create something that helped us understand who we were. So all of those books then were kind of intentionally less than 100 pages. They were to be non-intimidating. The language was non-intimidating. Nice little diagrams that let you read the community of self. And rather than having this thick volume that you could only find among other experts in the area of psychology, here an 8th grader could read this book and suddenly understand how they worked, to understand how they worked within themselves, how they could begin to master themselves and the kind of equipment that they came with as human beings, to understand that a part of our big problem as a community of people.
So even at that very early stage, you had a very advanced marketing strategy.
Yes.
For getting this information out, which I'm assuming isn't widely known. I wasn't aware of it. What I was aware of was the fact that these books are easily accessible and easy to understand. I didn't think for a minute that that was part of a broader strategy, effectively a marketing strategy to get that information out to a wider audience.
It really came out, it was an extension of the Muhammad Speaks newspaper.
Yes.
That was being done. They were really, the initial publications, the initial editions of those books were published by the Office of Human Development of the Nation of Islam. So the first editions of the Community of Self, Natural Psychology and Human Transformation, and the Chains and Images of Psychological Slavery were published out of that Office of Human Development. I subsequently, when I kind of moved into doing that same operation on my own and founded Mind Productions, then I began to republish them out of my own kind of publishing company from that.
So so you're established, you're for the nation, you've got married,
yes,
had children.
Yes.
You are clearly now part of this vanguard.
Yes.
This spearhead of development and realization around Black psychology, traveling a lot, and exposing yourself to attack, whether it be intellectually or otherwise. What impact did that have on you as an individual, in your family, or did it not have an impact at all?
The good thing was that, and I keep coming back to the fact that the nation as a social structure provided me a firm foundation that secured me against a lot of the kind of opposition that I would have had if I was trying to get bring these ideas in the mainstream environment. So when I left Morehouse and went to work with the nation, not only did I move my primary source of support and survival into that context, but I also moved that as my primary source of social support. I met my wife there, who was a member of the nation as well. So she and her family became that. Our children grew up with that kind of context. So we had a support network that was very much supported by that. So there was a lot of opposition outside. By this time, my family, who were, of course, good Christian people, had pretty much seen that even though I was different, I was still all right.
Yes.
Because they saw that I was still doing good stuff. And they began to gain respect.
Continuing to succeed.
Continuing to succeed. And not only that, because of the way that I was able to bridge my dual experiences of being the kind of mainstream, kind of articulate intellectual, together with this radical thought, I then was able to become a spokesman for articulating this new paradigm in a way that was able to get kind of a broad-based acceptance. So I was on Oprah in the early 1980s when I was in my mid-30s. And, those little books that I had started as kind of like my little radical pamphlets ended up being featured on one of Oprah's early programs with Ice Cube, talking about black men, the struggles of black men, and those kinds of things. And that gave me kind of like national visibility, And then by that time, groups around the world, we'd been able to we'd come to the UK, we'd gone to the Caribbean, other people had begun to hear about, the things we were doing. So it wasn't the kind of radical fringe group that it had been initially. It began to be kind of like socially acceptable. And we defined a place for us by being able to bridge these realities, So as I said, it always worked to my advantage that we had been able to maneuver what was considered to be good socialization. So I wasn't out, I think I mentioned during the conference that we had the other day was that one of the things that I had to be sure of that my PhD could not be revoked.
Yes.
And so as I began to think differently, my mainstream legitimization was not revocable.
Yes.
So I was still a European endowed, legitimate thinker. And no matter how much they wanted to somehow question the legitimacy of what I was saying, I was speaking with the legitimization that they had provided. So here I was, PhD from the University of Michigan, saying what needed to be said. So that support network permitted me to live in the two worlds very well. So I had the support network from that. Even as I moved away from the nation, by that time I had built a kind of legitimacy in various aspects of the thinking world community that somehow that the initial support that the nation had given me to somehow bridge the transition was no longer actively there.